What's harder, growing up as a fat kid and being like chubby, or taking a brick and mortar business and taking it online?
I would say it's brick and mortar business and taking it online, because you've got to deal with people on both sides, but one of them is going to be more emotionally scarring than the other, because by the time you take on a brick and mortar business, you've got the scars that have made you tough enough to do it.
Tough enough to do it,
Tough
okay.
enough to do it.
But growing up, let's talk about growing up fat, because it never happened to me. That was the opposite.
Grew up tall, right?
I grew up tall, exactly. I was bullied as a kid, but bullied in a different way, because my mum was religious. My mum was Jehovah's Witness, so we never had Christmases, we never had birthdays. So it'd be like, you come to school after Christmas, it'd be like, oh, what do you get for Christmas? I'd be like, nothing. And you know what kids are like. So I was different, and it was tough. But I wasn't fat. So at least I had that on my side. You said to me, I didn't even know that about you, but we were chatting, and you said that you struggle with obesity, and obviously there's a lot of people out there that struggle, and it's now kind of like your passion and what you do with your job, and you help so many different people. So how was that growing up?
It was difficult, man, and I think it's many people are going to go through various different things, and I think whatever you grew up with, you probably wanted something different, and vice versa. But for me, it was a challenge, and I think it isolated me a lot. I spent a lot of time alone, because I was, not necessarily because of the bullying, but because I was more ashamed of myself, and that was difficult. I was never not popular. I had a close group of friends, and I was quite good at melting between different groups. But at the same time, I took a lot of stuff personally. If people were calling me names, if they were doing certain things, I did take it personally. What I was quite lucky with is, because I was such a fat fuck, I didn't really get physically bullied, if that makes sense, because I was bigger and heavier than most people, and I could take a punch, right? I grew up in York the earlier years of my life, down to Devon in the kind of second half of my childhood, and I could take a punch, and people knew that I would also punch back. For all of the things that happened in my childhood, my mum used to say, if someone hits you, hit them back. It's as simple as that. So it left its scars, but those scars have been exactly what turned me into a better adult on many levels, including the kind of solitude and choosing to be alone a lot of the time. That came from that, and that's also been one of my, I think, biggest strengths as I've got older.
I think that's something that a lot of people don't realize, and we talk about framing a lot on this podcast, but being like comfortable alone and by yourself is something that a lot of people struggle with now. I think especially with social media and interaction and attention, all that crap. So to be able to like sit in a room and not have to worry about other people's opinions and just be on your own, I think that's like a skill now. I think that's something that people don't actually have, because everyone's like, no one ever sits on their own. No, you're never alone, because you always have your phone. So the moment you're sitting in the room on your own, you look at your phone, you scroll Instagram, you look at X, you look at all the other crap. It's like you're never actually alone. I say this with my wife, like I travel an obscene amount, but we're always together. I'm never away from her, because she can always ring me. My dad, when he was traveling, he used to work on cruise lines, and he'd be away 6 weeks at a time. They call each other once a week. So I feel like that ability to be happy on your own is something that people have struggled with. And maybe I made jokes about it, but being like a fat kid, do you think that's harder now because the bullying, I don't know why we're talking about bullying, but the bullying continues when you go home with social media and all this sort of stuff? Or do you think it was harder back then?
Honestly, I think it's probably harder now. I think social media has been an amazing thing for the world on very many levels, in connecting people in various different ways, in allowing people to create money and revenue streams in so many different ways. But it's also, social media has connected everyone, but it's disconnected everyone, which is a really weird thing. It stopped people from having face-to-face interactions, human interactions like this. And I think we've masked what we think is happiness with this fake world, this fake friendship. Oh yeah, these are my friends. No, they're not. You've never met them. You might message them here and there. And I think people are getting lonelier and lonelier, because we're just surrounded by this massive activity all the time, and people can't be alone. People really struggle, and I think that in itself is really, really damaging. Psychologically, it's super damaging, because if you, for whatever reason that may be, if you fear being with yourself and dealing with your own demons and asking yourself hard questions, which silence allows you to do. You're sitting there on your own, whether it's sitting on the beach or wherever, and you start to think about the stuff that you should be thinking about. That really, really helps, because if you can't deal with yourself, you'll never learn to deal with other people. I think that's really, really damaging at the moment.
You said sitting on the beach because you're fortunate enough to be in Spain a lot and be
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Dubai and everywhere else, but maybe sitting on a council estate is the same thing. But I think for me, what I struggle with and why I asked the question, and there's a great answer, and I completely agree that I think we are more disassociated now than we've ever been, and people are more lonely than they've ever been and more depressed than they've ever been. But when we talk about weight and we talk about being fat, the thing that I can't understand is when you were a kid and you were growing up, you didn't have access to the knowledge that you have now. Like if you have a phone, in my opinion, you have knowledge unlimited from people, all these inspiring people that are talking, yourself included, we're going on about exercise and nutrition and how to eat. I always thought that being fat was a gap in knowledge and that misunderstanding of how food worked. And now it's so easy to learn about how dieting and nutrition and exercise and all that sort of stuff. So I feel like surely it should be easier to not be a fat kid now.
I think it is, absolutely. But there's two sides to that, right? Is the internet has given us every bit of information we could possibly want at our fingertips in an instant. As we move into AI, that's going to get even easier. But the problem is, we were part of a generation where when you got home from school, you go and play football, or you go and play Kirby, you'd be out in the street, whatever it was. You don't remember Kirby? Standing on two sides of the road, throwing the ball at the curb. So we used to call it Kirby. But you'd get off your ass and you go and do stuff. And I think we were really, really lucky in that we've had both sides of the coin. We had the physical activity when we were kids, and we had the internet. Whereas I think it's getting more and more and more difficult to encourage young people to get off their arse now, because the world is too convenient. Humans are problem solvers, right? We find ways of making everything more efficient, more convenient for us, but it means that we're getting lazier and lazier and lazier with every generation. So yeah, despite the fact that all of the information is at your fingertips to do the right thing or to be leaner or to exercise, the technology is making us less inclined to exercise. It's one of those kind of semi-paradoxical situations in that our progress has caused regress. And I think that's an issue, right? And it's going to be an issue that continues to get a lot worse over time.